It is Wednesday, my dudes, which means it's time for another First Thoughts and Initial Impressions Epic 7 video. This will be on the first of the two AESPA characters for the AESPA collab. It is kind of how I guess I thought it would be, which is either very good or very bad. So these are not going to be free units. These apparently are gacha units. Thankfully, reading the patch notes, there seems to be some kind of bookmark item which is meant to alleviate the fact that we are getting 4 limited banners back to back to back to back. So we'll be getting 1 new banner every new week apparently until the collab is over and done with. The first one of which will be Winter, which we'll be talking about in this video, as well as Ningning, which will be the second one that you can pull for next week. Spoiler alert, I think both of these characters are very good. One I think is potentially meta-defining. I think it's a bit too early to say that because obviously the character is not out yet, and all I can do is infer based on the things that I see on paper, or in this case, a computer screen. So, strap in, my 2 cents on everything as you've come to expect from these videos, and as always, let's jump into it and just look at the S3 for Winter first.
I warned you, didn't I? I told you not to waste my time. Hi, I'm my Winter. I'll use my Armamenter abilities to get rid of all your enemies.
Okay, normally this is where I talk about voiceover trivia, but neither of the AESPA characters in this is actually credited, although I swear Winter sounds like Wendy Lee, so we'll see. Time will tell if that ends up being actually true. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I feel like the voice is Wendy Lee. Moving on to Winter's stats, she is a fire thief of the Capricorn zodiac symbol. It is a unique stat line. She has 1,057 attack, 5,542 health, 118 speed, 532 defense, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 3% dual attack chance, and 30 starting effectiveness. No starting effect resistance. Imprint releases attack for the team, and imprint concentration is critical hit chance. Overall, attack is pretty low. Health and defense are not exactly great either. They're acceptable for a thief, but for the most part, the standout here is going to be the starting 30% effectiveness and the very high 118 speed. That might not seem very fast to some of you because at this point we're just living in a world where everything is over 120 speed, but compared to most of the cast, 118 speed is quite fast. And the imprint concentration here of critical hit chance is super, super strong as well because, as you'll see, Winter is a character that really wants to have 100% critical hit chance, and having 15% starting critical hit chance is kind of a bummer. I think that one of the ways you'll end up trying to build her is going to be with a critical hit chance necklace, and we'll talk about that after we visit her S3. Moving on to Winter's skills, the first of which is going to be a passive skill called the Next Level, which is pretty awesome for a name and also pretty indicative of, I think, where we're at with this skill. At the start of the battle and at the end of the turn, grants stealth to Winter for 1 turn. After an enemy uses a non-attack skill, dispels all debuffs from the caster and activates Level Up. The debuff dispelling effect and Level Up can only be activated once every 2 to 3 turns depending on Malagora. Level Up grants immunity to the caster for 2 turns and fully resets the skill cooldown of Blackout, which is her S3 that we'll be talking about next. I see what they were trying to do here with this passive. It's kind of like a mishmash of all of the really good thief passives. You have a stealth component very akin to Assassin Kali, which makes her very difficult to deal with. The fact that it's also at the start of a fight makes it have big guiding light energy, meaning really hard to actually access this character reliably, at least with most of the current meta units. The fact that she also dispels all debuffs when your opponent uses a non-attack skill is very akin to Celine. Immunity makes it so that it's really hard to actually debuff her after she triggers next level. And then also you get the reset on the S3, which makes her very, very good against a character like Lua. So yeah, the next level to dealing with Lua is just to make a character that's arguably just as difficult to play against or deal with as Lua. Because Lua has no way to interact with Winter with her S1 or S2. Her S3 is a non-attack skill that should, in theory, reset Winter, but then it will proc the next level, which will then basically reset Blackout. So yeah, character plays very good into Lua, so that's already a good sign because almost nothing plays good into Lua. So that again, that's really worrisome. This character doesn't really have a super great way to deal with her outside of AoE attacks, and that's just me talking about the S2. I haven't even mentioned what anything else does in the kit. So off to a strong start already. Let's move on to the S3 Blackout. You acquire 3 souls upon use, and it has a 5 to 6 turn cooldown depending on Malagora. Attacks the enemies with various weapons and stuns the target for 2 turns and increases the combat readiness of Winter by 50%. A critical hit will deal an additional 5,000 true damage. Increases the true damage by 5,000 every time the skill is used, stacking up to 3 times. Actually, an insane S3. The only single target 2-turn stun in the game is, as far as I know, on Wanda. And Wanda isn't exactly highly played because she doesn't really do a whole heck of a lot of damage. Sure, she has a powerful stun, and she also has the ability to stealth herself like Winter does, but she doesn't actually have any killing power outside of that. She's kind of just annoying. We stun you, and then we kind of just chill in stealth and hope that everyone else on the team can get there. Winter, on a long enough game, actually does have that ability to kill you because she has turn cycling due to the 50% CR here, and then you also get 5,000 true damage. Anyone who's played against Rimuru knows, even if he's built with like 25, 26k HP, he is actually still deadly. He still does have the ability to kill you just because Devour Black Flame does 10,000 true damage. Yeah, this is a really, really insane skill. And remember, this is not a character that's just going to be perma-stealth like basically Spectre Tenebria. You have to bring AoEs into this character. And this move gets reset every single time you use a non-attack skill. This is a fast character, sits in stealth, 2-turn stuns somebody, which is incredibly debilitating. And also, it has a true damage nuke staple to it. And odds are, if you want to break them out of this 2-turn stun, you have to give her Blackout again. So that's, again, just really, really strong, right? The character is just, punishing you for bringing the answers to what is actually in her kit. Like, Soul Weavers are usually how you deal with stuns. Characters like Mediator Quirk are how you deal with stuns. But by doing that, you essentially give them a Rimuru S3 because the first one is going to be a 5k 2-turn stun. The second one, after you cleanse that stun, is then going to be a Rimuru level S3 nuke. So yeah, the only caveat that it asks for is having a critical hit, which is why I'm thinking that you don't really need to build damage on this character at all. If you build her incredibly bulky and have her sit in stealth, it's very, very difficult to beat this character. You simply just need the 15% in the kit, a 60% critical hit chance necklace, the 15% from the artifact that we'll be talking about in a second, and then you only need 15% more from there, which, wouldn't you know it, her imprint is going to be critical hit chance. So you don't actually really need a whole heck of a lot. You just need her artifact max and her imprint maxed, and then a critical hit chance necklace, and you are basically good to go on Blackout. You will always be hitting for that true damage, and if she's just really fast and really bulky and hard to kill, she can just win a game outright because she's going to be stun locking characters, and again, usually the way you break out of those will just give her Blackout back. Actually, insane S3, and overall, just based on the S2 and the S3 alone, I think that this is a very strong character. I do feel like Winter is going to be a must-pull character. If she's even remotely as good as I think she is on paper, then she's going to be an absolute force in this upcoming metagame. Finally, let's talk about her S1, which is Rapid Cut. Attacks the enemy with a sword with a 30 to 40% chance to stun the target for 1 turn, depending on Malagora's, and the Soul Burn increases the effect chance to 100%. It's Peyra S1. They gave this character Peyra S1. She basically has a mishmash of the best Thief S2s, a Rimuru level S3, and Peyra's S1. That is a frightening combination to have on almost any character. So, yeah, the character, all 3 skills, absolutely phenomenal. I'm fairly confident you're just playing this character on a speed set and whatever you can actually get as the 2-piece offset. Penetration obviously will help a little bit with some damage, but I wouldn't put it past you to play something like health or defense if you're looking for a bulkier one that is much harder to kill while she is in stealth. Moving on to her artifact now, it is the armament, and I think this thing is absolutely insane on this character. Increases the critical hit chance of the wearer by 15%. After using a non-attack skill, grants a barrier equal to 30 to 60 per level for 2 turns, depending on the level of the actual artifact. I believe the level up portion of the next level is a non-attack skill, which will give the barrier to Winter here. Now, at plus 15, it's like, what, I want to say 2,700, a 2,700 HP barrier. And at plus 30, it's going to be a 3,600 barrier. That's fairly huge. If this character has a lot of HP and is very tanky, the fact that the armament gives you a barrier while you're sitting in stealth means that even AoEs, especially if they're not ones that do a ton of damage, like say like a Solitaria AoE, they can't actually knock this character out of stealth. So already the character is incredibly difficult to deal with, and the only really good out is AoEs, and the artifact basically is padding to make it so that it's very difficult to get to her even through AoEs. The artifact is just incredibly strong, and it synergizes with exactly how I feel like the character should be played. You're just going to be sitting in stealth and just winning the game with things like your 2-turn stuns and your huge true damage nukes, and just hoping that your opponent can't actually break the barrier and knocking you out of stealth. Absolutely fantastic again. Winter and her artifact feel like 100% must-pull characters, especially since they are limited. Now let's move on to the second collab character, which will be coming out next week, which is Ningning.
It doesn't matter where you hide. You can't get away from me. Hi, I'm æ-NINGNING, and I'm an EAD hacker, so I'll track those baddies down till the very end.
Moving on to Ningning Stats, she is a Fire Soul Weaver of the Scorpio Zodiac symbol. Her stat line is unique to her. She has 785 attack, 5,077 health, 114 speed, 634 defense, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 3% dual attack chance, 30% starting effectiveness, and no effect resistance. Imprint release for the team is attack, and imprint concentration is going to be effectiveness. Not a super huge fan of the stat line here on Ningning. I don't particularly feel like any stat is good on her outside of her speed, which is very impressive for a Soul Weaver, but not exactly the greatest otherwise, and her high starting effectiveness. Overall, again, not really feeling it. Super low health for a Soul Weaver. Defense is solid, but not exactly the greatest. I would really like my Soul Weavers to have very, very high defense. I'm used to characters like, say, Maid Chloe or Ruel of Light. Taking a look here at her actual skills now, we have her S3, which is system hacking, and I think this is going to be the primary reason why most of you pull for this character. You acquire 3 souls upon use, and it has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown depending on Malagora. Hacks all enemies, inflicting barrier inversion, and dispelling 2 buffs before increasing the combat range of the caster by 40 to 50% depending on Malagora. When the target is granted a barrier, combat readiness increase amount is doubled. This is pretty much the character in a nutshell. It's Desert Jewel Bazaar for those of you who don't have Desert Jewel Bazaar, and even for us, players that do have Desert Jewel Bazaar, it's an extra copy of Desert Jewel Bazaar in case your opponent tries to ban Desert Jewel Bazaar. So, yeah. Barrier inversion is starting to sound like a mistake a little bit, because barrier traditionally is like the only thing that really feels like it keeps turn 2 and tank players kind of in the meta. Arius feels really underpowered right now compared to how strong Tehagel's Ancient Book feels in the current meta. So I'm honestly baffled that they actually made another AoE barrier inversion on a Soul Weaver. I guess it's so that way both players can't have access to ROL and feel like they're punished. Very, very strong skill. Very akin to Desert Jewel Bazaar as well. When you use it when you're supposed to be using it, which is when your opponent has a barrier, you essentially get an extra turn, getting an extra 100% combat readiness because it's doubled due to the fact that the opponent has a barrier, is essentially an extra turn. It's not as good as an extra turn, obviously, if your opponent has Politis, then yeah, that's kind of going to be a downer. It's not really going to end up being the extra turn like Desert Jewel Basar is. But just like Desert Jewel Basar, Politics is already a bad matchup. You probably aren't really playing that one too much. You're probably banning Politics if you are trying to make sure that this character is trying to do her job. I could end this review right here with just system hacking because it's already a strong enough skill to warrant almost everyone watching this pulls for her. That said, there still are 2 other skills. Her S2 is Butterfly Effect. You acquire 1 soul upon use, and it has a 2 to 3 turn cooldown depending on Malagora. It attacks the enemy, decreasing their combat radius by 30%. It then increases the attack of the ally except for Ningning with the highest attack for 2 turns and increases their combat radius by 30%. This is kind of like a remixed version of Amelia's S2. You don't get the cleanse, but you do get a CR push and an attack buff for a character. You can't actually choose it, but it does have the added upside of being able to push back somebody else. Instead of getting 50% combat radius for one person, you're essentially getting half that for a target you can't choose, but the other half you should get is pushing back an enemy of your choice, which is powerful in its own right. And it's one of the reasons why you probably would want to build effectiveness at all if you were trying to CR push back specific targets like, say, a Destina. Otherwise, you would just go the standard Soul Reaver route of like a speed set with a resist set if you don't actually care about it. Speed hit, though, is probably going to end up being the way that most people play this character just based off of the hacking effect as well as this S2 butterfly effect. Finally, we will move on to the S1, her basic skill, which is Sam Bear. Attacks the enemy with Sam Bear with a 30 to 40% chance, depending on Malagora, to stun the target for 1 turn. After attacking, when the target is stunned, increases the combat radius of the caster by 20%. So it's very similar to Maid Chloe's S1. Your whole team doesn't get the CR push, but you do have the effect here of a different soul burn. Whereas Maid Chloe is 20 souls for an extra turn, so an extra chance at it. This is, again, just Payra soul burn. They just gave a Soul Weaver Payra soul burn. So that's really, really strong already. Really annoying. So I think both characters here, AESPA characters, both Winter and Ningning, are worth your bookmarks. If you can only choose one, I think Winter is the stronger of the two, and she is the one that comes out first. That said, I still would try to pick up Ningning as well. Thank goodness that this collab comes with those bonus bookmarks in the form of the AESPA bookmarks, because I have no idea how I'm going to be able to pull characters like Winter and Ningning and also both of their artifacts and then still have anything left over for the other 2 that are coming in a few weeks. Speaking of artifacts, we have to at least quickly talk about Ningning's artifact here, which is Exif Detective Gadget. After using a non-attack skill, it increases the combat radius of the caster by 10 to 20% based on artifact's level, and removes 10 to 20 souls from the enemy, also based on artifact's level. Soul removal can only be activated once every 4 turns. Really strong piece of tech. Not the best against the aggressive mage compositions because no Soul Weaver is realistically taking the first turn and denying a lot of these aggressive mage strategies. But against standard mage strategies where you're playing like a Spectre Tenebria behind something like Unbound Knight Arwell or Fallen Cecilia, Exif Detective Gadget is really good in those scenarios. You will just basically get to just drain them outright. And it's essentially a 5-star Magaraha's Tome at the end of the day, which that in of itself means it's absolutely worth picking up for general Soul Weaver use. So I think the artifact is a bit better than Ningning herself if you already have Desert Jewel Basar, but I do think her banner is a must pull on just because you're going to want to have a barrier inversion character. The way that the game has just kind of naturally developed, barrier inversion is just very, very strong. And then obviously, again, this is just a good piece of tech against certain characters, a good piece of countering for specific compositions, and that makes it worth pulling. Lastly, to wrap up the video, let's quickly talk about the 3 new exclusive equipment that were added in this patch. The first of which is going to be for Haste. It is a Bloody Choker, gives him some critical hit chance here. Traditionally, fairly good bonus stat here. Not as good as Speed, but it's usually the second most desirable one. First ability makes it so that Envoy Scythe increases the combat radius of the caster by 15%. Second one has a 75% chance to inflict bleeding on the target for 2 turns when using Envoy Scythe. And then the third one, which is on his S3 Vampiric Seal, decreases the cooldown of Vampiric Seal by 1 turn. I don't play Haste, but I promise you that none of these 3 options really help the character. If I'm wrong, let me know down in the comments below which one is your favorite, but I don't play him, and I don't particularly think that any of these exclusive equipments are going to do anything for him. I think probably the extra CR is probably going to end up being the best one, perhaps. It's either that or Vampiric Seal, because decreasing cooldown is usually decent, but never the absolute best option. Again, it's mostly just here for stats. I just think that once again, Haste just gets the short end of the stick. I really think that they should have taken more time and kind of thought out better ones for his exclusive equipments than these that we got, but here we are. Next up is Bomb Model Kana. She got Nana's game console, which gives her 8 to 16% effectiveness, which is very puzzling. I would have rather have had speed, or I would rather have had attack or critical hit chance. Any of those would have been fine, because Bomb Model Kana is largely relegated to being a PvE Bloodstone holder at this point. That's what she's really strong at, as being a supplemental healer for things like Abyss and things like your Blooming Snag Liches, those kinds of things. I don't really think effectiveness does a whole heck of a lot here. First one is on her S1 Quick Bombardment. Has a 50% chance to make the target unable to be buffed for 1 turn when using Quick Bombardment. That is okay for some PvE applications, but not exactly the best. Second one is on her S2 passive Stance Shift. Increases the speed and dual attack chance of Stance Shift's striking stance by an additional 5%. I think that this is going to end up being the one that most people choose, because we did lose some dual attack chance in her base stats with the change to dual attacks in general. So getting some of that back would be super, super helpful. Remember, you did lose 2%, so you're essentially netting an extra 3% from where you were in the past. I really like this one for the Blooming Snag Liches and your Abysses. Lastly is on Full Bombardment. Makes the target unhealable for 2 turns when using Full Bombardment. It's decent, but I think, again, Stance Shift is just the clear winner. It's just going to give you more speed, more dual attacks, which means more Bloodstone procs on the actual areas that you want to be using Bomb Model Kana. And then lastly, we got one for Assassin Sid, Death Rattling Axes. It increases his effectiveness by 8 to 16%, which is fairly decent. That is actually a really good stat to give him without actually breaking the bank. Critical hit chance might have been slightly better to give him, but effectiveness is a solid thing to give him without actually breaking the character, so I do appreciate this. It does synergize well with Alabastron, which was a really fun and gimmicky build I've used with him in the past, so this kind of makes that gimmicky build a little bit better. The first one on Slice increases the chance to decrease defense by 10%. Solid, nothing super special though. Second one is on Swift Action. With Swift Action's effect, when an enemy dies, gives him a greater attack buff instead of an attack buff. Solid, again, not probably the best one. Finally, there's one on Execution. Dispels 1 buff from the enemy when using Execution, and this effect is applied before inflicting silence. Here we go. This is a really good one, because if Assassin Sid takes the first turn, which he should, you want to make sure that Execution is either killing a target, and if not, silencing it. With this exclusive equipment, you're pretty much guaranteed to do that, because if they have immunity or some other buff that's just like stopping you from doing the thing outside of stealth, obviously, then yes, this exclusive equipment on Execution is just perfect for that. It really helps him do his job. It makes him super, super consistent. That is a very, very good exclusive equipment, and I think it's the one that I would probably play. Otherwise, consider the greater attack one on Swift Action. And that is going to do it for this video in a nutshell. Hopefully you enjoyed it. As always, if I'm wrong or I missed anything, let me know down in the comments below. Tomorrow, for those of you who live in America, for Thanksgiving, I will be dropping How to Play Conquer Alias, so please look forward to that, and please enjoy your holiday and the rest of your week if I do not actually see you. Until next time, later now.